If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
So we did talk about the Nuggets to start this series. I hope Michael Malone won't be too mad when we shift gears here. I know he gets very upset when we're not talking about how great the Nuggets are, but we do shift gears because a big story in the NBA world was the impending future of Suns point guard Chris Paul. So Bleacher Report's Chris Haynes first reported that the Nuggets informed the 12-time All-Star that he was going to be waived prior to the June 28th deadline, when his $30 million salary for next season will become fully guaranteed. So by waiving Chris Paul, the Suns will only be on the docket for $15 million, not the full $30 million. And if they decide to stretch that remaining $15 million, they can stretch that into $3 million per over 5 years. So $3 million per year for 5 years if they decide to stretch the remaining $15 million left on Chris Paul's contract if they do decide to cut him. So that was the first report. Then Shams and Adrian Wojnarowski reported that the Suns had not decided anything yet, that they are still exploring their options. That includes potentially trading him, packaging him with a DeAndre Ayton in a trade, or even waiving him, but actually then re-signing him to a cheaper deal. So various different reports coming out. The first one saying that he had been informed that he would indeed be waived. So Chris Paul has been a player that has been linked to the Knicks at various different points in his career. If you remember when Melo wanted to come here, there was a thought that they were going to try to build a big three with him, Melo, and Mark Stoudemire. And then more recently, when he left Oklahoma City, the Knicks were among the teams where Paul was reportedly interested in. There might have been some interest on the Knicks side as well. He had famously told Matt Barnes in 2020 that he had considered the Knicks an option, but didn't want to play in an empty Madison Square Garden during the pandemic year. And that was actually part of the reason why he ended up not deciding to push a trade to the Knicks when he was leaving Oklahoma City. So put it on the table here. I know some people may think it's crazy, but it has to be asked because this is a player that has deep ties to Leon Rose, deep ties to a lot of the people in the Knicks front office. So I asked the question, should Chris Paul be a player the Knicks consider this offseason?
Yeah, I don't think so. I just don't see it as a match. I don't see it as a fit. Obviously, the Knicks have one kind of untouchable franchise cornerstone that they are going to build around. That's a 26-year-old Jalen Brunson, who's, as the Heat continue to advance in this postseason, his postseason performance, and we'll talk about it over the summer, but the more you think back on it, really was incredible. Only two players in the playoffs have averaged more than 30 points per game against Miami: Nikola Jokic and Jalen Brunson. Not Tatum, not Giannis, although he was hurt, not Jaylen Brown, obviously, not Julius Randle, not Jamal Murray. So, just again, and Brunson averaged 31 points while shooting 51% from the field. So I say all that to say that the Knicks finally have their point guard. And I think adding a player past his prime, a 38-year-old injury-prone Chris Paul, would be a move that that past regimes would consider, sell tickets and generate some interest, win the back page for a couple of days. But I don't think that's a move that fits this current Knicks collective.
I am so torn on this because everything you said is 100% right in many ways. You have a franchise point guard in Brunson. The Knicks have been burned in the past, signing well beyond their prime type of players, and they come in and it never works out. But there's one example I keep thinking about that keeps making me wonder if the Knicks should consider this. And I'm thinking about Jason Kidd when he was added to the Knicks. Now, the playoff Jason Kidd was a disaster because he had run out of however many pitches he had in his pitch count or innings he had run out because he then couldn't make a shot for a month. But I do think about like Jason Kidd's impact on that Knicks team as like the shooting guard. It was a very weird fit with him and Raymond Felton. But as like the shooting guard and almost like pseudo assistant coach slash, floor general without actually having the ball in his hands kind of guy. And he was instrumental to that 54-win season. Still the best season the Knicks have had in 25 years. So I think about Chris Paul and where he's at in his career. And he's not going to be taking any minutes from Brunson. He's not someone that I think should be playing 35 minutes a night or anything like that. But there is a part of me that wonders, could he make sense in the backcourt next to Emmanuel Quickly coming off the bench? And could he provide some late clutch shot making in certain games during the regular season? And can you keep him healthy enough to get him to the postseason where maybe he wins you a couple games there? It's something I would think about. I can't say I would pull the trigger. The reason why I think I would lean maybe not doing it is because the problem has been Chris Paul hasn't been able to stay healthy in the postseason. Is that recently they've been trying to get him to that point, and then he still gets hurt. So I would question whether it's even possible. But like having his guts and guile and having his mental aptitude on the roster for a team that is young, that we saw at times didn't play the smartest in the playoffs, especially against Miami, I can't think that Chris Paul having him on the roster would hurt. I can't imagine that.
Do you think Chris Paul has any interest? Do you think his, remember, this is a guy that led the league in assists in 21, 22, over 10 assists per game. Do you think he's ready for that, last leg? Obviously, kid was on his last legs, was content coming off the bench, playing 15, 18, 20 minutes a night, clear backup. I believe Chris Paul still envisions himself as a starting point guard, as a championship caliber starting point guard. That proves that he wants to win a title, and that's his main motivation. Listen, if he was willing to sign for like some of the mid-level and just basically be a mentor to Brunson and Quickly and teach Grimes the ropes, etc., that's a different story. I just view him as a guy that's really believes that he has the ability to play at a high level and wants to play heavy minutes and wants the contract.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and I tend to think that you're right, that he does see himself as a starting point guard. That's why I think, as soon as he there was word that he could be on the market, we saw a lot of people saying, well, could the Celtics use someone like him? I mean, the Celtics clearly need, in my opinion, need an upgrade at point guard. Marcus Smart is a good basketball player, not necessarily a great point guard. So I understand that. I guess my pushback would be, I just don't think Chris Paul is someone that a championship team should be relying on as a starting point guard. I think that'd be crazy at this point. He is 38 years old. He is extremely injury prone. To me, he is. I think if you're asking him to do that next season, I think you may be looking at like those last years Steve Nash had with the Lakers, where he gets so hurt, he's barely out there, and then when he actually plays, he becomes completely ineffective. Kidd taking that role saved him for that season. He was able to be a productive player for most of that season because he took that role. If he would have stayed in Dallas for another year and said, I'm going to play to be the starting point guard and run the show, he wouldn't have lasted. I mean, again, he barely got through that one season where he was planning playing this pseudo shooting guard 6-man role. Chris Paul is 38 years old. I think that at the end of the day, this is the role he probably has to step into. He may be more talented than Jason Kidd was at that time, but I think their bodies are pretty much the same. And we saw when Steve Nash was asked to do that, Steve Nash looked really good in Phoenix prior to coming with the Lakers. But Father Time is undefeated. Yeah. So if I'm Chris Paul, I'm Leon Rose, and I pitched him, hey, maybe you'll go down to Boston and maybe they'll give you the starting point guard spot. But trust me, they're going to be relying on playing 25 to 35 minutes a night, and they're going to need you to be one of the top end players in the playoffs. And if you break down, guess who they're going to point the finger at for why they didn't get it done? It's going to be you. If you go to the Lakers, it's the same thing. You want to go and start next to LeBron and AD, ask other players who came up short with LeBron James how it went for them and how LeBron's fans and Laker fans deal with that. Ask Russell Westbrook how that works. If you come to the Knicks, not nearly as much pressure, a team that's not looked at as a title contender, but you could maybe take us to another level and we could actually preserve years in your career. That would be my pitch to him.
It's an interesting pitch. I'm not going to lie to you. I would say that there was no chance of it happening, but I think you present an interesting opportunity. My counter would be that what's best for Chris Paul, and what Chris Paul thinks, is, again, to make it in the NBA, to be an all-time first ballot Hall of Famer. Yeah. You have to have an insane ego. You have to have insane self-belief and confidence. Yeah. And think, yourself as that, you don't luck into.
And by the way, by all accounts, Chris Paul has all of those things. Right? Ego, all that stuff. Yeah.
100%. You need it. Yeah. So again, if you're the Lakers, and I think, again, it's not like he'll have a lack of suitors. You make very good points, but the Lakers' alternative is D'Angelo Russell, who was unplayable in the postseason.
Yeah.
You could say, is Chris Paul any better a defender than D'Angelo Russell at this stage of his career? Maybe, just based on guile and IQ and all that other stuff. And, any team that signs him is going to tell him, listen, we're going to play you 45 to 55 games. We're going to limit your minutes, et cetera. We want to keep you healthy, yada, yada, yada. That the Lakers can do that with some of the depth they have. Celtics can do that, obviously, with Smart and Brogdon and Peyton Pritchard if they want to go that route. But you're right. As far as the Knicks are concerned, I think it's worth exploring to see if he's willing to kind of go that route. And again, I think the one, and you mentioned it at the beginning, why it does, certainly make some sense to at least consider it is Paul and Leon Rose are very close.
Absolutely.
At each other's wedding. I mean, they are tight. As tight as agent player can be. So, if nothing else, Paul would do his buddy Leon Rose a favor and maybe just say, listen, I'm interested in the Knicks because they're playing so well, that type of thing, just kind of generate some positive buzz from the for New York going into with the free agency period.
Look, Knicks have Emmanuel Quickly, who can, of course, be the backup point guard when Carl's not playing. They have Deuce McBride. So, they have other guys who, Chris Paul doesn't have to play 82 games for the Knicks at all.
No.
But I the other thing I thought about, too, there's two players, actually. It wasn't just Jason Kidd. I also thought about what I've seen Kyle Lowry do with Miami this year. Kyle Lowry's making, $25 million. Whatever you don't have to pay Chris Paul that. Right. But, I'm thinking, Kyle Lowry's won games for the playoffs with his shot making, with him just taking these charges, just ripping the ball out of guys' hands on rebounds. I absolutely could envision Chris Paul doing that for some team.
Definitely.
And I wondered if that could be the Knicks. So that was my other thought there. Are you surprised that Phoenix is willing to move on from Chris Paul? Potentially. I mean, we don't know what's happening, but
right.
I think Chris Haynes is right, but
right. And one thing on the Paul thing, I think he might be a year away from him embracing kind of that role, that Jason Kidd, that Kyle, give it one more shot, maybe sign a 1-year deal with the Lakers or Boston.
Yeah.
And then if he flops or get injured, then he's 39. I think Kidd might have actually been 39 too.
I think so. Yeah.
As far as the Phoenix situation, important to note, you mentioned it in the preamble. So Phoenix has a couple options. Obviously, they're going to consider trading him if they can get some assets back. That would be the ideal scenario. If they waive him and don't stretch him, they can re-sign him, as you noted, for a cheaper contract. And if he assuming he clears waivers, which he most likely will do. However, if they stretch him, waive him and stretch him, which means that $15 million gets split over 3 seasons, so it reduces the cap, gives them more salary cap flexibility. They'd be further below that second apron, which we've talked about in the past, and we'll continue to talk about, because that's going to be a major story for all teams, especially high spending teams. And the Suns have 2 high max level contracts, and obviously in Durant and Booker, and then DeAndre Ayton making 30, 35, around 35 million. So those are the things. So it's not certainty that he won't come back. Again, the options are, if as long as they don't stretch that contract, they can waive him and then re-sign him. So I think there's a possibility that happens. But yeah, listen, I got to admit, I think we all were a little bit surprised, considering the fact that that they made the major trade for Durant. We know the close relationship between KD and CP3. That this was kind of their big 3, so to speak, along with Ayton, obviously that kind of core 4. But I will say, and some other people have kind of, this kind of been rumbling about Twitter a little bit, that you have to assume that the Suns, have somebody warming up in the bullpen before they yank their starting pitcher. So, there's been talk about maybe James Harden is a guy that they have eyes on, maybe Kyrie, who knows, what other options and opportunities they could. Fred VanVleet's a free agent as well. So we'll see kind of how this thing all plays out. But it should certainly make for an interesting offseason.
It's crazy because, I had actually been talking about this with my brother a while ago. This probably was actually when the Suns lost, because I kept saying I thought the Suns were in one of the worst positions for some of the championship contenders. Not obviously have Kevin Durant and Booker, but in terms of roster building moving forward, I thought they were in a ton of trouble. I mean, they have 7 guys under contract next year. That's including Chris Paul, Cameron Payne, who also has a non-guaranteed contract, and Ishmael Wainwright, who has a team option, who they'll probably pick up at basically $2 million. Like 7 guys for a team that all throughout the playoffs we kept saying, man, this team has no depth. Like, how do you fill a roster out with just 7 guys? I mean, okay, maybe 2 rookies come in next year. Okay, now you're up to 9, and then you guys sign other guys with the money that they were making. Like, they were going to be one of those teams that was going to be right up against that apron. I think if you sign 2 rookies, you probably go above that. So now you can't use that non-taxpayer $12 million exception. So now you're kind of screwed. Like, now I figure out find a way to build the rest of your roster out. So I actually thought, like, Chris Paul, they had to do something with him. Like, they either had to waive him or trade him. Like, they could not allow themselves to come into this year with it's offseason with 7 guys under contract and being one of the high tax paying teams. Like, that was not an option. So I don't think they wanted to be here, but I think this is kind of where they landed themselves. I think that, in my opinion, if I was them, I would waive him and sign him. I'd say, look, we're giving you $15 million anyway. So if we cut you and you take 5, okay, you're getting 20, or you're getting $25 million from someone else. Like, maybe, I don't know. I mean, what is Chris Paul worth on the open market? I think that's a very interesting question. There are a lot of guys who have these who are going to be free agents potentially, like him and Draymond Green, where I'm like, I don't know what those guys are worth in the open market. Not that they're not valuable assets, but asking to sign those guys for multiple years or a lot of dollars, given their issues, whether it be Draymond with lack of offense, lack of reliability in terms of the suspensions and techs, with Chris Paul, his health. I don't know what that's worth, but I can't imagine he's going to make that $30 million back. So it might then be them trying to make a gamble here. But if they do decide to stretch and waive him, that I'm a little less wary of, because I mean, you're still going to be over the cap. So, like, how many guys do you really think you can sign with that $12 million? I mean, it's Arizona, it is playing with KD and Book, so maybe I'm underestimating that. But that just seems like, I don't know. I think that I'd prefer to just use the rest of that $15 million to sign Chris Paul and sign maybe 2 other guys, and think that can stretch, that can get a bunch of different guys, and not including Chris Paul, that $12 million. I don't know. It seems a little odd. The math doesn't seem right there.
Yeah, again, you have to think that there's another move that's coming down the pike. They're at least availing themselves the opportunity. We'll see how it plays out, but it's definitely rolling the dice a little bit, and it kind of goes back to something we talked about regarding Embiid, and if another superstar comes in the market, how many of these teams that again, the Suns traded Cam Johnson, 4 first-round draft picks, and Mikal Bridges for 35-year-old Kevin Durant.
And they traded Jay Crowder, who they weren't playing, who was on the team.
Yep, and who the Nets flipped for 4 second rounders. So it's just one of those things where if you're the Suns, now that you've caught Chris Paul, would you rather have a 26-year-old Mikal Bridges making $25 million, or 34-year-old Kevin Durant making 45 million? It's, again, not to mention the 4 first-round draft picks. It's listen, if you have KD, you give yourself a chance to win. KD and Booker, but can he stay healthy? There's just these superstar trades, when it seems like you give up whatever you have to give up to get the stud player, don't always work out, as we found out the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I did not love where the Suns were after this trade beyond this season. I felt like this was an all-in for this season kind of trade. And now that they failed miserably in the playoffs, it's like, well, good luck trying to figure out how to figure out the rest of this roster, and good luck keeping KD healthy and hopefully Chris Paul healthy.
Not to mention the fact that Nuggets aren't going anywhere. That they're at the start of what they're doing. Everybody's locked up. Jokic, Murray, MPG. Again, if he gives you anything, Aaron Gordon's a great piece, and Bruce Brown's signed.
How about Christian Brown? The game he played.
Christian Brown, having a big, second half as a rookie. Finding him as that 7th player in the rotation. Now you have, now you're a championship team. That's when you can really sign those guys that take that minimum level contract to be that 8th player. That to really settle into that. A Jason Kidd type end of the career player that's ready to contribute.
Right, kind of like the guy they have right now, Jeff Green. They'll have a couple more guys like that probably next couple years. So Suns in a little bit of a weird position. We'll see if the Knicks are involved in anything involving this Chris Paul Suns situation, but it will be a fun situation to follow. Okay, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.